Plenary, Building International Solidarity in the Context of the Arab Uprisings. To my right we have Todd Cretion and Suzanne Boulad. My name is Sarah Farahat and this is Kelly Lynn. And so we're going to be going down the line. This isn't going to be a Q&A format. We can meet afterwards and chat. We're going to go over to Rogue Hall and get some food and drinks and chat. So, with no further ado.
Okay, I'm going to start, and I'm going to time myself so I don't go into time. I'm going to speak.
25.
We're going
So I have
to
about
take
an
care
hour.
of
So, okay.
it.
Okay. Well, I wanted to begin by just again thanking the organizers of this conference. It's really important work that the people here in Portland and around the country are doing, and there are some myths about how political organizing happens, which I think they're important to puncture these myths. And conferences like this have a role in that. And one of the myths that is very strong, I think globally, but especially here in the United States, is this idea that nothing ever happens until one anointed leader comes along and makes all the changes for you. And that leader can either be a great speaker and a great organizer, or that person can just be a symbol. So I think that one of the greatest myths in American history is the idea that Rosa Parks just got tired one day and sat down on the bus, and that started the desegregation movement. That started the Montgomery bus boycott. And that is such a lie on so many levels, and it is perpetrated. And I use that word intentionally. It didn't just happen. That myth is perpetrated on the political scene in the United States to attempt to whitewash, again a good word in this context, the reality of the political struggle for civil rights in the United States. So Fannie Lou Hamer was an organizer with the NAACP. She went to the Highland Organizing School. She was trained by leftists.
Yep.
She had sat down on the bus before. She was the recording secretary of the NAACP, and she wasn't tired. You can listen to her. You can listen to her interviews, and she says, "I was tired because you're always tired at the end of the day. But I sat down on the bus because of the murder of Emmett Till and the lynching, and I couldn't take it anymore. And I wanted them to arrest me because I wanted to provoke a movement." And I think that you never know what's going to happen. You never know what the breaking point is going to be. You never know when boycotting a specific good is going to lead to a mass movement against Israeli apartheid. You never know when a YouTube video is going to go viral and start a revolution in Tahrir Square. You never know when people are going to, I think quite a nutty idea, put down a bunch of tents in New York City, and it's going to create a movement. Or where a union, people essentially in this country, to be a union activist at work, you have to be underground because they'll just fire you as soon as they hear you're in favor of a union. You never know when that is going to pay off. Here, or not, where are we? We're in Portland. In Seattle, just up the road, a group of teachers decided they'd had enough of the testing, and they said in one school, in Garfield High School, we're going to boycott this one test, and it has raised the question of standardized testing across the country. So the point of this is that you never know when the accumulation of the grains of sand that you're placing in the scales of history are finally going to start to tip the balance. And so it's impossible to look into the future and just guess what your acts are going to mean. And I had the privilege of having a class with the great civil rights revolutionary leader Angela Davis a couple years ago. And in our moments, as we are very human, in our moments of desperation and, dare I say, depression and feelings of futility after so many years of doing these things, you can sometimes feel like, what is the point? After some 20 years of activism, just from a personal point of view, I got into politics because George Bush invaded Iraq in 1991. And his son did it again. This thing goes on and on and on, and you think the futility of trying to push the rock up the hill, and it just rolls down at the end of the day again. But her response to that question was, she said, you have to act as if what you are doing matters. And you can never tell when the accumulation of your collective acts are going to break through. And that as bad as the Reagan counter-revolution, and as bad as the reorganization of American imperialism has been, and as bad as the war on women being carried out, and as bad as the Islamophobia is, we are not playing on a field that was exactly the same as it was before the Civil Rights Movement, or before the Women's Movement, or before the anti-war movement in Vietnam. There are millions of people in this country, despite the fact that we're atomized and we're scattered and we're not together as in a fist. There are millions of people of all ages, of all races, deeply in the working class, students, teachers, millions of people who cannot stand to watch television, who cannot listen to the corporate media, who can't stand to read the newspapers because they know that what is being done in their names is vicious and it is wrong and it is a lie. So even the people who were temporarily scared into passivity in Boston for a few days, hundreds of thousands of people in Boston, even when the police are rampaging through the neighborhoods, whipping up Islamophobia, would stop and think for a moment and say, this isn't going to help the schools, this isn't going to help me find a job, this isn't going to help with my student debt, this is just going to incorporate the strength of the police state so that they can fill up the prisons, so that they can gun down people on the streets, so they can start yet another war. And sure, Obama's doing it with drones now, but if we know anything about American history, there will be new occupations. And not the good kind of occupations, the bad kind of occupations. And there's millions of people who know that out there in this country, and certainly around the world. I don't think we have to doubt that that exists around the world. But sometimes in the belly of the beast, you can feel alone. And so a conference like this is important because it brings people together. We get our critical mass together, we straighten out our ideas, we discuss, we share experiences, but then we come together and we have to go back out into the world. And one of the hardest things is maintaining your activism, maintaining your principles as day after day you feel like you're in a minority. And so conferences like this play a role of strategizing and strengthening us. But we have to, at the end of the day, go back out and do the work. And just like Ahmed Maher was saying in a couple sessions ago, they didn't know that on police/thug day in Egypt on January 25th that it was going to lead to a revolution. I think we've got a generational struggle ahead of us to save the planet, to stop imperialism, to break Israeli apartheid, to end the prison system in this country, to fight against rape culture, to rebuild the union movement. It's going to be a generations-long struggle. But the people here today who've decided to commit themselves to that are the people who are just like Rosa Parks, and we may or may never have our names recorded by history, but those are the type of people that we have to aim to be.
Woo! I'm going to send a few more snaps for Todd, because that is exactly the kind of sentiment that I think we all need to keep in mind as we keep moving forward. I am also incredibly thankful and appreciative of this conference. Like Todd was saying, I mean, everyone feels like they're alone, but Syrians especially have felt very lonely lately. It's for many reasons, and I've lived, breathed, dreamed Syria. And I haven't had the emotional space to branch out, to recognize that there are struggles for social justice everywhere in the world. And so this conference has been such a source of warmth in terms of reminding me that this movement for social justice is a global one, and that social justice in Syria is related to social justice here in the US, is related to social justice in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Iraq, and that all of these movements will combine to create the world that we want to see in the future. So, in terms of solidarity and what that means for Syria and standing with Syria in a way that, as I was describing earlier, is both productive and meaningful and, for lack of a better way of saying it, not gross. Because there are lots of gross ways to express solidarity with Syria. And, war hawks like John McCain are not doing that. So Syria has suffered from isolation for so long, even before the revolution. The Syrian regime suffered from isolation because it was part of the axis of evil as portrayed by Western bullying. And it was isolated even during the revolution, both because it wasn't as sexy as the other revolutions, and because the level of brutality made it very hard to relate to the Syrian revolution, and made it very hard, there weren't journalists on the ground in Syria from day one relating the stories of the people, just, sharing that growth of power and agency and voice that was building from day one of the revolution. And then as the brutality began to increase and the Assad regime adopted the scorched earth policy of mass civilian, of mass assault on civilians. The journalists that did come, the solidarity that did come, it didn't serve Syrian interests either. So it's been a very, like I said, Syria's been very isolated in many ways. And so what solidarity means is to break out of that isolation. Solidarity means making connections and building context. So by placing Syria within this struggle for global justice, it both strengthens us as Syrians and it places us in a better position to stand with the rest of the world as well. So, what are ways to connect with Syria on a very real level? So, first of all, I'm going to make a very bold statement. If you use U.S. involvement to defend the Assad regime and not stand with the Syrian people, that is being intellectually lazy and morally corrupt.
That's
There's no reason to not recognize the power of the organizing, of the creativity, of the resistance of the Syrian people, and the potential that has to create a much stronger, independent Middle East. A girl can dream, but I truly think that's what we're working for and what's going to happen, even though the odds are always stacked against us. That basic act of not taking the easy way out, of not, of not letting old social paradigms stop you from standing with a people demanding justice. That's step one, on a very basic level. Step two, information isolation. And this is a bit odd to say about Syria because it's in the news almost daily. It doesn't suffer from the isolation of Bahrain or of Palestine in terms of not being given any media time at all. However, being given media time in our corporate media isn't a blessing. So that information overload almost causes the opposite effect. That also puts Syria in an information isolation because the overwhelming amount of both biased and flat-out incorrect information isolates the humanity of Syrians. So I urge all of you to reach out to find sources that make the Syrian revolution come alive in your conceptions of the world struggle for social justice. So some of those sources, Jadaliya is an amazing one in terms of publishing very nuanced and insightful articles about Syria. With always the interests of the people in mind. Syria Deeply is also an interesting website that publishes a wide variety of articles from many different perspectives. A personal favorite, an author of mine, her articles never fail to bring me to tears. Her name is Amal Hanamo, Hanamo. And the reason why I bring her up is because it's very difficult to spoon-feed your own humanity to people who are unwilling to listen. So that's, by reading these articles that place Syrian grieving, that place the suffering of the Syrian people in a wider context, that make that story more empathetic, and that bring Syrian culture to the world. That in Syrian culture that hadn't been shared even before the revolution. These kinds of articles turn Syria from a victim, from a chaotic war field, out of control humanitarian crisis, and turn it into an actual movement that one can identify with, and that is easier to actually see as something worthwhile, something worth fighting for. Humanizing Stories, definitely. So another way to build solidarity with Syria, of course, is to assist in whatever way we can from here in the United States. And of course, the scope of the humanitarian crisis isn't a secret to anyone, with over 1 million refugees out of Syria and 4 million internally displaced people inside Syria. That's over a quarter of our population that's been displaced from their homes. That by itself is in need of millions and millions of dollars in aid. But that's almost like the first level of assistance. The humanitarian crisis needs to be addressed, of course. We cannot survive and grow as a people if our people aren't in their homes, aren't being fed, aren't warm. However, in Syria, despite the continued existence of the regime, there is also a movement that is functioning, is growing, as if the regime is already gone. Syrians have come up with some incredibly creative and innovative solutions to mitigate the effects of the brutality of the regime and the complete lack of any basic services. So for people to function in a world where there's no garbage, there's no electricity, there's no water, you have to get pretty damn creative. And so these projects are in staunch need of support. The local civilian council of Aleppo, for example, is a group that's just now starting to come together. As a society, we were completely suffocated from any form of civic engagement for decades. And so all of our efforts are only 2 years old. We're babies in terms of moving towards mobilizing ourselves and getting things done. But now, after the 2-year mark, everything is just slowly starting to click together and to move forward, and that is such a beautiful sight to see. And so these are the kinds of projects that need to be supported, not just monetarily. I mean, everyone gives according to their means. But the fact that these projects are known about and given a signal boost that goes above the Jabhat al-Nusra headlines, that goes above the dehumanizing focus on the military aspect of the situation. The military aspect by itself needs hours to talk about, but that's not what a revolution is for. The military will bring down the regime, but the military will not bring a revolution to Syria, and all Syrians know that. The vast majority of people who are holding a gun today don't do that by choice.
That's right.
And they don't want to continue holding a gun. There are so many stories of people who are dreaming about the day that they can go back to their lives and begin building a country, because that is what our end goal is, to build a new society that is healthy, that is democratic, that is free. And so to keep the focus on these projects, there isn't any way to, as of now, to provide direct support to things like, helping people rebuild electrical towers, helping people, create new sewage systems, helping people, for example, the Free Lawyers of Aleppo, one of the things that they asked of me that they said they really wanted was a police force that is a fair and, that actually is a way to enforce some sort of stability into a community, so that the Free Lawyers of Aleppo can begin building a civil code of law that will hold people accountable for their actions, particularly within the armed opposition. They have begun building courts that hold people accountable, but they need monetary support to build systems to bring that to fruition. There is an exciting project happening by a Syrian Bay Area activist. He's building a website that will provide a means of directly donating to these individual projects. And I will be sure to signal boost like that like crazy when it's out in a couple weeks. So by keeping your eye out for these kinds of things, that is a top-notch way of empowering not just the Syrian people, but empowering this global struggle for justice in general. Thank you.
So Kelly and I are going to follow this up with a little bit of what's going on in terms of solidarity work here in Portland. Well, I guess a side note, I just went down to Pioneer Square on Friday and was one of about 6 people that was starting to get together and talk about drones. And I think that that's something really important in talking about solidarity with the Arab Uprisings, because our drones are going directly over there. As well as thinking, I don't know why I wrote that, but anyways, I'll go backwards. Also, We Are Oregon and the Black Working Group working on keeping people in their homes here in Portland is just as important as working on the BDS movement in the United States and across the world to help Palestinians keep their homes in Palestine as well as return to their homes in Palestine. So, just some cross connections that we have here in town. But just wanted to pass it to Kelly to talk a little bit about Super, and then I'll finish up talking about the BDS coalition here in town if you want to get involved.
Awesome. So Super essentially is the main entity that has put this weekend on. There are a lot of good faces in the audience that have contributed to all of the wonderful things that are happening. We are a student movement, but we're also community members. Both Sarah and I are not students anymore. We're students of lots of things, but not technically. So Super has kind of a priority on education because we are in a university. We hold screenings, we hold educational events and lectures, and those are really, really important in educating what is kind of remarkably a blind topic. Not a lot of people realize what's happening in Palestine in reality. When we think about me 2 years ago, I really did not know a whole lot about the specifics of Palestine. I knew kind of the mainstream talking points and the two sides, but the reality of the situation is not disseminated very equally in any sort of way. So SJPs and Supers are essential. Ways that you can help support those groups: sign up for the email list. I think our listserv hits like over 600 people, and that's wonderful. And when we hold events, we get a lot of people, and we love that. We're really trying to build the students in Super right now. So May 9th is going to be an orientation for Super. So if there are any students in the room, and PSU obviously has a wide variety of ages. Yeah, the sign-up sheet is going around, and that's just to get emails and updates, events, all that stuff. But we're really trying to build a student movement within Super because we do need to get money every year to hold things like this, and we need to have students in the group, and that is very much like the core of what we hope this movement can continue to exist in is students.
So just to give a short overview for anyone who doesn't happen to know, BDS is Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. It's been called upon from Palestinian civil society since 2005. There's three things being called for. One is the right of return for all Palestinians living outside of Palestine, as well as equal rights to those Palestinians living within Israeli borders at this point, the return to the 1967 borders, and the dismantling of the apartheid wall. So that's pretty exciting. And has anyone seen our flash mob video from New Seasons? If you haven't, you should check that out. It's got over 100,000 hits. It was about 2 years ago. Just type in Portland BDS New Seasons, and I'm really excited for us to continue to. I'm a part of Artists Against Apartheid as well as these Super and the BDS coalition, and I'm really excited to bring more arts activism into our movement. We are always accepting new people, and if you have any questions about it, I mean, tomorrow is really a BDS heavily focused day here at the conference. We've got Transforming the Academy, which will go over a little BDS 101 and has West Coast activists at that, as well as Revolution, Refugees and the Right of Return with Ziad Abbas. The cultural boycott, Remy Kanazi is going to go over that. That some people have a lot of questions about how the academy and arts and culture can be tied into the boycott movement. Following that up, we've got 5 broken cameras, which explains exactly, very concisely, visually what's going on in the West Bank right now. And that will be followed up with solidarity activists from the United States who have gone there, and you can question them about what that international solidarity really looks like and how that might work for you or not. concurrently, NADA is going to be facilitating and talking about the national and international BDS movement here, and a regional meeting will be held for BDS activists as well. So yeah, there's plenty of ways you can get involved, and I can't stress enough the importance of this work, and I really feel that this is the way that we can start to pressure as well as start to educate people in the United States about where our tax dollars are going.
Just a couple of things to wrap up. Aaron Dixon said it so well today. If there was a mass movement in our country that said no to Israeli occupation, apartheid, and siege, it would not exist. And what groups like Super and ISO and everyone else that's represented here believe is that if most people knew, most of those people would be on our side. They would be on the side of human rights. They would be on the side of equality for Palestinians. BDS is a tool. It's not an ideology. It's not a savior. It's a tool. And it's the most appropriate tool we have because it was given to us by Palestinians and Israelis themselves. They were the ones that came up with it in the first place. There are a lot of things to hash out with it. There are a lot of things to understand about campaigns and divesting and little food co-ops stopping their carrying of Israeli products. The BDS book, Omar Barghouti, yeah, we can't emphasize it enough. It's fantastic. It lays it out. And it is very much a solidarity struggle. BDS comes out of the South African struggle. And we touched on a little bit today. Raise your hand if you associate like the 80s with South Africa divestment, boycott stuff. Most people associate it. So the call for boycott came out in 1959.
Really?
So there were decades of building that movement. When did the call for BDS come?
2005.
2005.
July 9th, 2005.
And we've all, I guess for those of us that are educated a little bit about BDS, there are huge victories in the UC schools, UC Irvine divesting. It's remarkable what's happening, and the intersectionality of solidarity movements coming together is exciting. And we do have social media as a tool, which we did not have in the 80s. I don't think we had Twitter. And that's huge. And so education is big. The cultural boycott, there are a lot of people who think that's really destructive to Israeli society, but in reality it upholds these ideals that everyone wants to hold on to. So education, participation, there are a lot of exciting things. Portland BDX, I'm doing this all day. Portland BDS Coalition is very much in a building stage, figuring out what our vision is going to look like in campaigns, but stay tuned for that because it's important and it's dominoes, and there have already been dominoes that have been falling, but they're spaced out farther. Pretty soon they're going to get closer and they're going to start going, and we're going to be able to look back at this time and remember what it felt like, what it looked like, and it's going to be awesome.
Thank you very much for coming, and we hope to see you tomorrow. The panels start at 9:30 tomorrow, so a little bit earlier.